All praise, our glory, our honors most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. With peace to you in the name of Jesus. This is your brother Elisha Israel of the household of faith, and I count it a blessing each and every time that I can come before you to preach the word of God, and never do I count it as a light thing to do so. All right, brothers and sisters. In today's Bible study, I'm just going to answer some YouTube questions that I received. Okay. And the first one I received is from, or that I'm going to answer, is from Benjamin Israel. He says, "Greetings, brother. I have some questions about the future of our people. I have seen comments and videos on YouTube about a second Exodus. They say that in 2019, our captivity ends and we will return to our land with slavery, reparations, silver and gold." It says, "Is this true? If so, would you mind providing support from the Bible so that I may have a study guide? Thank you." Okay, so let's go to the Bible and see where that comes from, okay? And that's something that you saw, you still see it today being said, but you used to see a lot of Israelites back in the day would say that, hey, we're going to, we're going to be here for 400 years, okay? And they would come here, they're going to read, they would read what I'm about to read to substantiate that, okay? So let's go there. This is Genesis, the 15th chapter, and we're going to pick it up at verse 13, okay? So it says, "And he said unto Adam, nor of a surety, be assured that he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Okay, so now this is where they get that from. Okay, this is where they get that from. And but what is this referring to specifically? Okay, well, let's keep reading and we'll understand. So now, if you read before this, in verse 12, it says, "And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror, great darkness fell upon him. Then it says, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Okay, so if you keep reading, it tells you who specifically this is talking about. It says, "And also that nations whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance." All right. So that's the part where they come out with silver and gold, right? "And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full." Okay. So what is this talking about, brothers and sisters? This is not talking about our captivity in America. And understand this, we went to the reason they say 400 years in 2019 is because in 1619 you had some indentured servants who came here. They were black folks who were stolen from a ship. They had Spanish names, and they came here, and they came into this land. Okay, so that's the point they counted from, 1619. Okay, but we should understand that we are in all different types of places, not just America. Okay, scattered throughout the nations. And furthermore, this specifically is referring to Egyptian bondage. Okay, so will it be that exactly 400 years that Israel is redeemed? Let's keep reading. Let's find out first that this is referring to Egyptian bondage. Let's go to Exodus, the 12th chapter, and we're going to pick it up at verse 37. It says, "And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot." So this is when they're coming out of Egyptian bondage. They're going into the wilderness. And it says, "Besides children," verse 38, "and a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle." And a mixed multitude, many people went with them. Okay, with Israel. That means that people of other nations. saw that that was God, the God of Israel was a true living God, and that Ra, whoever else they were worshiping at the time, but that was garbage, they came out. So it says in verse 39, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. And then it says, okay, because they, you know, the last plague was, you know, the firstborn died, and then that was on the Passover, and then that next day, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But then it says in verse 40, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. See, that's what that was talking about. And it said the iniquity of the Amorites has not reached its brim, or not been to the full, because that was the land that Israel eventually went into and took. Okay, let's go to another place. Let's go to Acts 7. See, it doesn't say specifically that that's talking about American captivity. It doesn't say that, so we shouldn't jump to that conclusion. Now, is it possible that things happen in a similar fashion? It could be, but then you can't say that for sure. That's referring to America, because that is specifically referring to Egyptian bondage. This is Acts 7 and verse 1. Acts 7 and verse 1. And it says, then said the high priest, I'm gonna pick it up at verse I'm gonna pick it up at verse 4. Okay, because here's Stephen, who was full of spirit, had much faith. He is basically running down the history of the people. Okay, and it says, so he said, then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans. He's talking about Abraham. Well, let me pick it up at verse 1, because he's going to address them. It says, then said the high priest, are these things so? And he said, men and brethren and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham. So he's referring you back to what we just read about. It's in Genesis. It said, when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. Okay. Then it says, and said unto him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show thee. So he called him out. Walk before me and be perfect. Leave that habitation that you were once living in. So it says, he says, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land wherein ye now dwell. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on, yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when he was as yet he had no child. So understand, he's telling that was going to happen. Your seed's going to inherit this land, but before they were to inherit that land, what do we read? That they would be in bondage for 400 years. Okay? Then it says, and God spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them into bondage. So that's sojourn in a strange land, that's Egypt. And then they were brought into bondage. A Pharaoh arose that didn't know Joseph. You read in Exodus 1. Then it says, in the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said God. And after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. Okay. Then it says he gave. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped the part. Go back to verse 6 again. It says, and God spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil 400 years. Okay, so every time you read about that 400 years, that's referring to Egyptian bondage. Okay, so back to the question, he says, when is the second Exodus, in the sense that Israel is going to be regathered? Because the Bible does indeed say that. Okay, let's go to Matthew, the 24th chapter. It's all over the Bible. We're gonna stay in the New Testament and see if it's exactly 400 years. See. Let's see when Israel is being regathered as a people, from everywhere, all over the place in which they've been scattered. Let's see what time that's going to happen. It says, this is Matthew 24 and 29. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give a light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. That's the sign of the return of the Mashiach, or the Messiah. And it's not just an eclipse, but rather the sun and the moon are going to shine, and the stars going to fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. You read another place, it's talking about a great earthquake. Verse 30, it says, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So this is talking about Jesus, what we call Jesus in English. Verse 31, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. And what are they going to do? It says, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Who are, so this is the gathering of his elect. Who are his elect? Let's go to Isaiah 45 and verse 4. It says, for Jacob, my servant, Isaiah 45 and verse 4. It says, for Jacob, my servant's sake, and Israel, mine elect. Okay, so that's the regathering. Okay, when is Israel going to be regathered? At the last trump, immediately after the great tribulation. Okay, immediately after the great tribulation is when the Lord's come back, and then he's going to gather his people. Okay, specifically. See, you can't read, when you talk about that 400 years, you can't read that about his second coming. And we're going to add something else here. Let's go read something else. Let's go to Isaiah the 27th chapter. Okay, just so we know where they're coming from or what's going to happen. Because the prophets all foretold this. It says in Isaiah 27 and 12, Isaiah 27 and 12, it says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall beat off from the channel of the river unto the stream of Egypt, and ye shall be gathered one by one, O ye children of Israel. And it shall come to pass in that day that the great the trumpet shall be blown. We just read about that trumpet in Matthew the 24th chapter, verse 31. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the great trumpet shall be blown, and they shall come which were ready to perish in the land of Assyria, and the outcasts in the land of Egypt, and shall worship the Lord in the holy mount at Jerusalem. So they were coming up to Zion, going to Jerusalem. But that's the regathering. So, and he even tells another place, he's not going to talk about the regathering they came out of Egypt, but they're going to talk about how Israel came out of the north and south, east and west from all these other nations. And when is this going to happen, though? When is this going to happen? Immediately after the great tribulation. Now, let's add something else there. Let's go to so a couple places we can go. Let's go to Daniel. Because we want to find out how long the great tribulation is. Okay, so here we read about this man of sin, this son of perdition, that's going to arise during that time. This is Daniel 7 and verse 25. It says, he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time, that's 1 year, and times, that's 2 years, and the dividing of time. So times, and the dividing of times is 3.5 years. Why do I point that out? Because he's coming back. When does the Lord come back? Immediately after the great tribulation. And what's he going to do? He's going to gather. You're going to hear the great trump's going to be blown. He's going to gather Israel from all over. Okay, that's the regathering. Now, that is, so you saying the great tribulation lasts, everywhere you read it, 40 and 2 months, times the dividing of times, 1,260 days, 3.5 years. It's 2017 right now. The Lord is not coming back until immediately after the great tribulation. So that would be more than 400 years. So that's what I'm saying. You can't say that specifically. Now, again, one thing about God, he does things the same exact way. So you know Israel's gonna be regathered by mighty deliverance. Nor should we confuse. I don't want to add another element to this because it seems like there's some confusion already. But nor should the regathering of Israel as a nation and being brought into the wilderness where the Lord is going to deal with them that face to face, should that be confused with the place of safety? That's two different times. Okay? Two different times. But you're going to have when all Israel is going to be regathered. From everywhere, they're going to be regathered into and then eventually go into the land. Okay, so you can't read that specifically in the Bible where they say, you know, you're coming out of America after 400 years, because again, Israel is all over, and they scattered all over, went to different places at different times, and the Lord's gonna regather them all. Okay, so the long answer to your question is you can't say that specific technically. All right, so the next one is from this brother Hebrew 1939, and it's more of a comment than a question, but I did want to address it. He writes, the problem with John 1:1 is God has no beginning. Thus the word cannot be God. Okay, so he says the problem with John 1:1 is God has no beginning. Thus the word cannot be God. Okay, so here's now the problem is not with John 1:1. The problem, in all due respect, is with your understanding of what's being said and what's not being said. Okay, and this is sometimes, you know, we should just keep in mind there's nothing wrong with the word of God. When there's a misunderstanding, there's something up with it's something with us. Let's go to, matter of fact, let's just show you this. Let's go to Daniel. Okay, let's go to the book of Daniel. It's not that it's something wrong with the word of God. It's that you don't understand. That's what it is. Is that you do, and that's, you know, that's just something that happens. We're not omniscient. Okay. So let's read some here. This is Daniel, the 9th chapter. And now Daniel is in captivity, right? Now Jeremiah the prophet, another prophet, he wrote about Israel being in captivity for 70 years. Okay, so now Daniel's looking at the time frame here, and he's saying, it says in Daniel 9 and verse 1, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, the prophet. So you got one prophet, he's dealing with the book of Jeremiah, or what Jeremiah wrote. And he says that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. But the time frame, it seemed like it's more than 70 years. So he didn't understand. So what he did, he didn't say, you know what, something's wrong with Jeremiah. Jeremiah must have a problem. Because nothing, you understand what you're saying? You're saying that's something wrong with the gospel. According to John, there's nothing wrong with the gospel that John wrote. The gospel according to John, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm gonna point that out. I'm gonna show you what we should do when it's something in the Bible that we don't understand. It says in verse 3, and I set my face unto the Lord God to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth. Okay. Then he started to acknowledge the sins of his people. Well, so what should you do? You should seek the Lord. Right? So in John 1:1, you say the problem with John 1:1 is that God has no beginning, thus the word cannot be God. That's not, no. As a matter of fact, again, it's about what's being said and what's not being said. So in John 1:1, it says, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. Okay? It's not saying that he was created in the beginning. Understand that. It's not saying that he started in the beginning is referring to the creation. Because if you keep reading in context, he tells you that. It says the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. What was made? Let's go to Genesis 1. Real quick, let's go to Genesis 1. So it says, in the beginning, Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's what he's referring. He's not telling you that God was created or that he even has a beginning, we'll find. It's not saying that. So who is this God specifically that made all things? Okay? Because if you look, God is not his name. If you look back there, the word is Elohim. Okay? So plural intensive word that is referring to more than one being. You have two that were God in the beginning. You had the Father and you had the Son. That's why it says, let us make man in our image. God was not talking to the angels because we don't look like angels. Perhaps you had the Father talking to the Son. And who did it? The Son, because it says all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Who is this? That's talking about the Word. Let's hold our finger here. Let's go to Colossians 1 real quick. See, nothing's wrong with the Bible. It could be something wrong with our understanding of what we read. And so what we should do is not discount what we read, but pray to the Lord to have some understanding, to gain some understanding. So this is Colossians 1, and we're going to pick it up in Colossians 1 and verse 16. It says, for by him were all, this is talking about Jesus. It says, for by him were all things created. Well, verse 15, it says, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature? Firstborn of every creature. It's talking about the Messiah. It says, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible. Whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And this it is, it says, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. Let's go to, he existed before. The beginning refers to the creation. It refers to us. It refers to this earth. It refers, but he has no beginning. God has no beginning. We'll find. But let's go to Hebrews real quick. Hebrews 1 and 1. It says God, Hebrews 1 and 1, it says God who has sundry times in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets. We read about the prophet Jeremiah. We were reading in Daniel. Daniel was reading about Jeremiah. It said, but what has he done in these last days? It said, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. Now, what does it tell us about his Son? The author of Hebrews goes on to say, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds. See, that's what the beginning of what? The beginning of the creation. He was there. And you know what? In order to be there at the beginning of the creation, he had to exist before the creation. See, John 1 is not telling you that he came into existence at the time of the beginning. It's not telling you that in any way, shape, or form. So John 1 and 1, again, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was at the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Then it tells you who this is talking to about specifically. It says, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. We know that is none other than the Messiah. Okay, so let's go. Let's pick it up a little bit, because he had no beginning. This is Revelation 1 and verse 8. What does he say? He says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, saith the Lord, which is, and then it says, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. See, he's not, when he said he's the beginning, and it means he inhabits eternity. It's not saying that he has a beginning or has an end. He's everything. As far as time goes, he's always existed. That's why it says, which is, and which was, and which is to come. That's past, present, and future, right? Let's go to Psalms 90. So, but understand, John 1, there's nothing wrong with John 1. It's not saying that he literally had a beginning. Even when he said the beginning and the end, the first and the last, that's just talking about his existence. He exists. This is Psalms 90, and we're going to pick it up at verse 1. Psalms 90 and verse 1, it says, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Listen to this. It says, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. See, before you had the creation, you had God. Let's go to Exodus, the 3rd chapter. Because understand, this is when Exodus, the 3rd chapter, is talking about, we're going to read about when God manifested himself unto Moshe, or Moses. Okay? So this is Exodus 3, and we'll pick it up at verse 13. Exodus 3 and verse 13, because he had a question. It says, in Moses, this is Exodus 3 and 13, it says, and Moses said unto God, behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, the God of your fathers have sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? And listen to what he tells them. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. So at this time, he told them, hey, I am that I am. Meaning I exist. I'm the one that inhabits eternity. Tell him that. That's what he's saying. He said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am have sent me unto you. So who said, man, I am the one who exists and has always existed. The one who we understand created the worlds. Now, who is this that was talking to Moses? And you can't, you are in error to say the word is, the one you call the word is not God. Because now you saying the Messiah is not God. You're wrong. This is John the 8th chapter. John the 8th chapter. Because here the Messiah is talking to these Jews who kept denying him, even they were blaspheming the Holy Ghost, and they were denying him because they know the scriptures and that he's fulfilling all these scriptures. They know, but these religious leaders are scared of losing their position. Right? So they steady denying him. But they know he was the one that was to come. But this is John 8 and verse 56. He says to them, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. Now they had a question for him. Then said, I'm at verse 57, John 8 and 57. Then said the Jews unto him, thou art not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham? You're not 50. How did you see Abraham? Abraham came many years ago. Jesus said unto them, verily I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. I'm the one before he was what? Manifested in the flesh and dwelt among, he's dwelling among us and as a flesh and blood man. In this passage. That's how he dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory. The glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So it said, verily, verily, I said to you, before Abraham was, I am. He's the one that said, I am. He is the one. He's the word. And we know the word created the worlds. We read that in Hebrews 1 and Colossians 1. Nothing wrong with John at all. Next question. Okay, so this brother said, my question is this. I'm aware that a mixed multitude came out of Egypt. What happened to them? Did they also drop the ball, so to speak, like Israel did? All right, thanks for your time and edification. This is from this brother who's always been listening for a long time. Sound is hearing. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's go to Exodus. Back to Exodus, the 12th chapter. Okay, because the Bible, and this flies in the face of many Israelites who claim that only Israel can be saved. He has always made a way. It tells you, even though customs could be one thing, when you read and understand, he did not make, he calls Israel his firstborn, indicative of more to come. You keep reading throughout the Bible about, on an individual level, those of other nations can be saved. And if you say that's not the case, you have to twist scripture, which is what's going on wholesale. But nevertheless, Exodus 12 and verse 38. We'll go back here, verse 37. It says, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot, that were men beside children. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds and very much cattle. So a mixed multitude. But he said, did these mixed multitudes, they drop the ball too? Let's go to Numbers, the 11th chapter. See just an example, did they drop the ball? Numbers, the 11th chapter, we're going to pick it up at the 4th verse. Numbers 11, and we'll pick it up at verse 4. Let's see what the mixed multitude was doing. So it says here in Numbers, I'm going to pick it up at verse 1. Because, you know, Israel dropped the ball. It said, and when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Listen to this. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting. Right? It says, and the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? Okay, so yeah, they went astray. The whole practically everybody practically was going astray. The vast, a lot of them was going astray. Okay, I say that. So what was up with the mixed multitude? Yeah, they were in that wilderness clowning just as well. All right. The next question. I think this is the last question I'm gonna answer today. Let's see. Yeah, this is last question. This is from YouTube Monica, first name, last name. It said, brother, I ask you this because it is on my spirit this morning that I have looked for scripture supporting facing east to pray as a suggested practice for prayer and found very little of no information that I understand. Now see what the brother, I don't know if that's a brother or not. But first name, last name said that I understand in parentheses, right? So this individual obviously trying to get some understanding, which is what we all should be doing. It said, but still have done this, talking about praying. Now he's saying praying to east. Now I'm gonna point that out just how that's an error. It says, but still have done this and wonder if this practice, hold on, I'm gonna start that part over. It says, I ask you this because it is in my spirit this morning that I have looked for scripture supporting facing east to pray as a suggested practice for prayer and found very little, if no information that I understand, but still have done this and wonder, is this practice seems similar to what those men did in Ezekiel, and they're praying to the sun? And is it that God is ubiquitous or in the east? Okay, so now ubiquitous, you know, that's a school word now. Ubiquitous means seen everywhere. Okay, so first off, it's not praying to the east. It's praying to a specific place. Let's go to 2 Chronicles. See, it's not about praying to the east. It's about praying to a specific place. This is 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, we're going to pick it up in the 6th chapter. 2 Chronicles, the 6th chapter. 2 Chronicles 6. And we'll pick it up at verse 12. 2 Chronicles 6 and verse 12. It says, and he, talking about Solomon, stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the congregation of Israel and spread forth his hands. Okay, so now he's at this dedication of the temple. He's going to make this prayer. Okay, so now let's skip down to verse 21. It says, hearken therefore unto the supplications of thy servant and of thy people Israel, which they shall make toward this place. What place? Where the temple is, and the temple is in Jerusalem. So it says, they shall make toward this place, hear thou from thy dwelling place, even from heaven, when thou hearest, forgive. Okay, now so the place that he's talking about prayer is not the east per se, that's a direction, but a specific place, which is Jerusalem. Okay, let's go to let's get down a little bit. Let's go to verse 37. Because now he says all these different factors, if the people go through these things like famine, etc. He said if they would pray towards this place. This is verse 37. He said, yet if they bethink themselves in the land whither they are carried captive. Well, let's read verse 36. It said, if they, talking about Israel, if they sin against thee, for there is no man which sinneth not, all have sinned. It said, and thou be angry with them and deliver them over before their enemies, and they carry them away captives unto a land far off or near. Just like we've been carried away captive into this land, America. Like the brother had a question about 400-year captivity. Why he had that question? Because we have been carried into captivity. As Moses said, by way of ships in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. He said something though in verse 37. Yet if they bethink themselves in the land, I mean, if they take it into their hearts, which is the mind. It said, yet if they bethink themselves in the land whither they are carried captive, and turn and pray unto thee, right? You praying unto God, it says, in the land of their captivity. See, for us, we be praying to that place, which is Jerusalem, and that just happens to be east, where we are. But if we were another place on the planet, it would be a different direction. We're not praying east per se. We're praying specifically to Jerusalem. And why do we do this? Because we follow the Bible. So this, he said, you carried away captive. He said, let them pray to this place. Let's keep reading. It says in verse 37, yet if they bethink themselves in the land whither they are carried captive, and turn and pray unto thee in the land of their captivity, saying, we have sinned, we have done amiss, and have dealt wickedly. Right? So even that's what Daniel did. He acknowledged the sin of his people. Okay? And he was what? In captivity. Verse 38, if they return to thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity. So acknowledge God, pray towards God, toward that place, acknowledge your sin. Then it says, listen to this, and pray toward their land. See, it's not the east, it's toward the land. The land just happens from where we're at in the Americas, in this hemisphere, it's to the east. Okay? It says, and pray toward their land which thou gavest unto their fathers. Right? So we read about the fathers out of Israel. He's talking about when they first went into the land. It says, which thou gavest unto their fathers, and listen to this, and toward the city which thou hast chosen, and toward thy house which I have built for thy name. Then hear thou from the heavens, even from the dwelling place, their prayer and their supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive thy people which have sinned against thee. That's what we need to do as a people. Pray not to the east, but pray specifically towards Jerusalem. That's what he said, towards that city. Now, and we know that this prayer was confirmed. We know if you read in the 7th chapter of 2 Chronicles, the glory of the Lord filled the temple. They had to get up, they had to leave out. He confirmed, there was divine confirmation. Because let me just read it here. It's in 2 Chronicles 7:1. Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven. Now, fire came down from heaven. It didn't say a priest lit the fire. Fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifice, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. And the priest could not enter into the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord had filled the Lord's house. He divinely confirmed that prayer. That's why you always say, you should be familiar with it. If my people will call by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face. But he tells you how to do that specifically. You repent from your sin, you acknowledging your sin, repent from it, turn to him with your whole heart, and praying towards that place, towards Jerusalem, that chosen place. Let's go to Daniel, because I mentioned Daniel earlier. Let's just show you that Daniel did that exact same thing. This is Daniel. We're going to pick it up at the 6th chapter, Daniel 6, and we're going to pick it up at verse 10. Now, Daniel is what? He is a captive in Babylon. Listen to what he did. It says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, because they tried to set him up, they had this decree that you couldn't pray to anybody, right? And Darius unwittingly signed it. But when he knew it was signed, he didn't stop praying to God. It said, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. He didn't stop nothing he was doing. Because there's a true God in heaven. So, but what was he praying to? He was praying to, he said, and he's praying, believing he's going to hear him. He's doing what Solomon has said to do. That was that prayer. So we're not praying to the east. Okay. Now let's go to Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel, the 8th chapter. Ezekiel, the 8th chapter, and see what you're talking about, and see how that's different. How praying towards Jerusalem is different from what they were doing in Ezekiel. Because the question was, and part of the question was, you find very little information about facing the east to pray. That's true. That's not about facing the east for believers, for his people. It's about praying towards Jerusalem. We just read about that. And it just happens to be east from where we are. So it says, the practice seems similar to what those men did in Ezekiel, and they're praying to the sun. Okay, so let's see what these men did. This is Ezekiel 8 and verse 15. It says, then said he unto me. So now these things, the defilement of the temple is being shown unto the prophet Ezekiel. He said, then said he unto me, hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. Because they had women weeping for Tammuz. Then it says, and he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of God. So now these men got their back to the temple of God. We were told to pray toward that place and toward that temple. But he says they had their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east. See, they pray. Now they in Jerusalem, but they facing east. And it says, and they worship the sun toward the east. Because they were worshiping the sun. But facing Jerusalem, he told you to pray toward that place. That's something totally different. Because if you might be facing west praying towards Jerusalem if you're in a different part of the world. But let's go to Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter, because he told Israel specifically not to engage in that type of worship. This is Deuteronomy 4 and verse 15. It says, take ye therefore good heed unto yourselves, for ye saw no manner of similitude on the day that the Lord spake unto you in Horeb out of the midst of the fire. He says, lest ye corrupt yourselves and make you a graven image, the similitude of any figure, the likeness or male or female. So don't make a graven image. And it said, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged fowl that flieth in the air. It said, the likeness of anything that creepeth on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the waters beneath the earth. Then it says something, unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. See, the Lord brought that about. Keep seasons, right? Days and years. But it says, but the Lord hath taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, even out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance as ye are this day. See, they had went totally contrary to that law, right? About worshiping the sun, because that's what they were doing. But they got their backs to the temple and facing the east. We praying towards Jerusalem. We're not worried about the sun. So it's two different things. Let's go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings, the 23rd chapter. Pick it up in the 5th verse. 2 Kings 23. We're almost finished. In verse 5, it says, because here we see the reformations that Josiah put forth. Let's see what he did. It says in 2 Kings 23 and verse 5, it says, and he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the city of Judah, in the cities and in the places round about Jerusalem. So now Jerusalem is city of peace, the city of the great king, the place that he chose, and yet put his name there, and yet what's going on? Israel, they dealing in these high places. They dealing in false worship. Then it says, so it says, and in the places round about Jerusalem, them also that burn incense unto Baal. Then it says, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven. So you got them, they dealing in sun worship, amongst other types of worship. It says, he brought out the grove from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem unto the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron. So he put down these idolatrous priests. He burned the grove, okay, which is an idol. Okay, he even say he break down the houses of the Sodomites. So it's straight up reformation, which we need today. This is the last place. This is Job, the 31st chapter. Because Job says something here. See, the righteous are not dealing in sun worship and facing the east towards the sun. Right? We're not doing that. This is Job. Let's see something he said. Because here and Job was righteous, and he's steady talking about the things. He tries to justify himself, but he said, like, I haven't been doing these things. This is Job 31, and we're gonna pick it up in verse 35. He says, if I beheld the sun, verse 25. Wait. Job 31 and verse 26. It said, if I beheld the sun when it shined, or the moon walking in brightness, and my heart hath been secretly enticed, or my mouth hath kissed my hand, this also were an iniquity to be punished by the judge, for I should have denied the God that is above. Okay? So what did he say? He said, man, I'm not in my heart secretly worshiping, having a matter of worship the sun. I'm not doing that. So that's not what's being done when you praying towards. You should be praying towards Jerusalem, not the east. Again, I know that's being redundant, but the east is that direction. We praying toward the city of the great king. And with that, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you that we at the Household of Faith meet every Sabbath at Indiana University Northwest Library Conference Center, room LC 105, 3400 Broadway, Gary, Indiana. We live stream right here on the IsraelTeach YouTube channel. We also live stream at www.IsraelTeach.org. We have a radio broadcast that airs every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on WLTH 1370 AM. And if you're not in the Chicagoland or Northwest Indiana area, you can simply go to IsraelTeach.org and click on the radio live broadcast link to hear that message. And with that, brothers and sisters, peace.